At the same moment, Major John Howard's D Company had secured Pegasus Bridge, 73 miles to the east, an airfield was suddenly lit up. Within minutes, the guiding flare path was extinguished, but not before it had been seen by the enemy. H-hour for the long-awaited invasion of Fortress Europe was still 5 hours away. Yet, a British Royal Air Force Mosquito was about to topple the first domino in a series of losses that would leave the stumbling Luftwaffe even more weakened by the end of Operation Overlord. This historic first aerial victory over the newly opened Second Front would be made by a little-known Kiwi ace with a suitably Gallic surname. And this is the story of how it happened, largely in his own words. In the weeks preceding the 6th of June 1944, forever now associated with that rather generic invasion term D-Day, secrecy became the chief concern for the Allies. Huge deceptions, which thankfully were successful, were carried out to misdirect the Wehrmacht and give the Allies the crucial hours they needed to establish a beachhead on the continent. One of the key aspects of making Operation Overlord's objectives a success was total air supremacy across Normandy. Not only would this keep the Allies safe from Luftwaffe bombs and bullets, but also from prying eyes. The efforts to keep German aircraft away from the target invasion area began almost as soon as it got dark on the evening of the 5th of June. Contrary to popular myths about Overlord, the Luftwaffe was fairly active for such a reduced force. They would be met in the air by both the British, Canadians and Americans during the day on several occasions. Hundreds of hours of flying would be carried out by the Allies that day, mostly without satisfaction. Nevertheless, the first success of the day came about almost like clockwork. A quick technical note for this video, the missions should really be shown a bit like this, but as I know that every time I show a night mission on a YouTube video it does very badly, I've decided just to show them like this. Seems to make people happier. Number 605 Squadron was operating the de Havilland Mosquito from Manston, which ironically was mere miles off the coast of the Pas-de-Calais, from where the Allies hoped the Germans would still be expecting the full invasion. In the operations record book, the month of June began with these words: "June, what a month! The most eventful of the year." During the previous months, 605 Squadron had been carrying out its normal intruder missions into German-occupied territory. The normal form was to sniff around German-operated airfields across France and the Low Countries, waiting for one to be lit up. Even the Germans couldn't land without a flare path of some form, and this would be the moment a Mosquito would swoop down and open fire on an unsuspecting German night fighter or bomber. Another common task for the squadron was to fly over shipping routes laying flowers, or mines to you and me. In the last week of May, most of the flying was merely reported as flying tests, but all of this would quickly change in June 1944. On the night of the 5th to the 6th of June, 605 Squadron was operating at maximum effort and 18 Mosquitoes were in the air, the first taking off at 23:17 hours and the last landing at 04:45 hours the next day. 3 Mosquitoes were detailed for special duties that night, namely engaging flak installations and searchlights around the Airborne's landing grounds near Caen. The other 15 Mozzies carried out intruder missions across Normandy. 10 reported the patrols as uneventful, and 1 crew never came back. Flying Officer R.E. Lalong, Royal New Zealand Air Force, and his long-serving observer, Sergeant J.K. McLaren, took off from Manston at 23:51 hours. Just under 30 minutes later they had reached the French coast and proceeded south to their patrol area, 75 miles away. For 40 minutes the Mosquito crew orbited the 2 Norman airfields it had been tasked with covering on that historic day. Flying Officer Lalong explains what happened next. At 01:30 hours, Saint-André was observed to be lit with flare path and visual Lorentz QDM 300 degrees, but at 01:37 hours, when we were just about to bomb the airfield, all lights doused. However, 2 minutes later we carried out our attack and dropped 2 500 and 2 250-pound bombs in the aerodrome. A very short while after this, searchlights appeared around the airfield and formed a canopy. A 0142 ever lit with flare path and visual lens QDM 300 degrees, and at 0147 hours the pilot obtained a visual on an aircraft at 1,000 feet, silhouetted against a cloud and a steady searchlight, with a moon considerably helping him to recognise it as an ME-410. The aircraft was carrying no lights. Flying Officer Lalonde then flew in a steady climb to just underneath the enemy aircraft and confirmed it as an ME-410. He then throttled back and pulled to dead astern, and at a range of 150 yards opened fire with a 1.5 second burst at about 900 to 1,000 feet AGL. Strikes were seen around the cockpit area, and the aircraft then burst into flames, in the light of which it was without a doubt confirmed as an ME-410. It then lost height slowly in a spiral dive and finally crashed about 7 miles southeast of Everett Airfield. Flying Officer Lalonde then lost height and took photographs of the aircraft burning on the ground. 5 minutes later, the aircraft exploded and pieces continued to burn. Flying the ME-410 was Oberfeldwebel Hermann Bolton with his Funker Feldwebel Wilhelm Löw. Both men served with KG-51, which had been operating from Eindhoven and Gliese airfield in the Netherlands. By the evening of the 5th of June, an advanced commando unit from KG-51 had been sent to the forward base at Saint-André, 50 miles west of Paris, to carry out intruder missions of their own. As ever, information concerning the German operations is sparse. It's unclear why Bolton and Löw were airborne in 9k am as Lalonde and McLaren arrived in the sector. Or were they? Chris Goss, the prolific aviation historian, suggested in a forum comment that Bolton and Löw were airborne at 0130 Central European Time, aka German time, and were shot down at 0148 British time, suggesting a sortie of over an hour. However, at the time, the Allies were operating on double summer time, GMT plus 2. This is a time that France had adopted since the German occupation and continued with the appropriate changes until November 1945. So, in fact, the ME-410 was in the air for some 18 minutes, if we believe Goss's takeoff time. This poses some interesting questions. The airfield at Saint-André was illuminated for some 7 minutes before Lalonde and McLaren arrived to drop their bombs. After this, the ME-410, piloted by Bolton, remained in the area rather than making a direct course to carry out its assigned mission. Could this suggest that Bolton and Löw had some issue with the aircraft, or were merely up to test the equipment? Whatever the truth, by 10 minutes to 2 on the morning of D-Day, Bolton had miraculously survived a parachute jump from 100 feet. Löw lay dead. The first official Luftwaffe casualty of the day. But who was the man who shot them down? Roy-Emile Lalonde, despite the very French name, was a son of Auckland, New Zealand, and had been a carpenter before he joined the Royal New Zealand Air Force as a 24-year-old in January 1942. After completing pilot training, he was posted to 605 Squadron in 1944, then operating the de Havilland Mosquito. He opened his score, along with Sergeant McLaren, at 23 minutes past 3 in the morning of the 28th of April 1944, over the airfield at Ober-Olm. Swooping down, the crew spotted an aircraft taxiing on the airfield below and opened fire. Good hits were seen, and this first victory was stepped up to a probable at the request of Lalonde. On the night of the 8th to the 9th of May, the crew would claim a Ju-88, confirmed as destroyed, along with an FW-190 damaged at Crailsheim. Following the historic downing of Bolton and Löw on D-Day, Lalonde would claim another aircraft before the end of the Normandy campaign. During another Intruder patrol on the 10th to the 11th of June, Lalonde and McLaren had a busy night, almost engaging several German aircraft. Eventually, under a perfectly clear moonlit sky, they caught a Ju-188 at 1,000 feet southeast of Coulommiers. After 2 short attacks where the Mosquito closed to within 100 yards and as low as 300 feet AGL, the German aircraft was seen to disintegrate and burst into flames, losing height rapidly. The flames were so brilliant the whole countryside around was clearly visible, and the aircraft crashed with a terrific explosion. Following the rather heavy days of operations immediately after the initial Allied invasion, 605 Squadron's role suddenly changed. While on a specially assigned Channel patrol on the night of the 14th to 15th of June, Flight Lieutenant Musgrave and his navigator, Flight Sergeant Samwell, destroyed a pilotless plane. As proudly recorded in the 605 Squadron ORB, this was the first diver to be shot down at night, and it had come after 2 nights of fruitless flying. Over the coming months, 605 Squadron would increasingly be called to carry out these types of patrols, and accounted for 36 V1s in total. It appears that the task was extremely laborious, as the ORB comments. The month of June ended with the squadron still chasing doodlebugs and still hacking them down. Intruding, these days, seems a thing of the past. LeLong and McLaren carried out 2 other patrols of particular distinction before war's end that need to be mentioned here. The first occurred on the 2nd of October 1944 when the 2 men were on patrol over Jasmunda Bay in the Baltic. Having made the long crossing into the target area via the Kiel Canal, first with a quick refuelling stop at RAF Coltishall, the Mosquito arrived over target at about 14:08 hours. Flying over the southern shore of the bay, LeLong spotted 13 Dornier DO-24s moored in 3 neat little rows. The Kiwi wasn't having any of it. Roaring down, he carried out 7 to 8 close-quarter attacks with his guns over the next 7 minutes, always flying north to south. As he launched his first attack, the initial DO-24 he targeted burst into flames and was soon a raging inferno. By the time his cannon shells had been exhausted, he had definitely destroyed 5 of the huge flying boats and claimed 2 more as damaged. However, LeLong had to say this in his report. The 2 claimed as damaged only were soon to be well and truly hit, and were the last to be attacked. In all the other attacks, the aircraft started smoking first, and later the smoke increased in intensity, and the flames were seen seconds later. The 2 claimed as damaged were under observation for a short while only, and no doubt shared the same fate, eventually, as the others, but unfortunately were not seen to be destroyed. While returning to base, the crew spotted a BV-138 near Cape Arcona, just 50 feet off the waves. I turned starboard and closed to 150 yards. The rear gunner opened fire, and we believe hit our port propeller. I then closed still further, as we only had machine gun ammo left, and fired a short burst which silenced the gunner. I followed through and sprayed the B&V with machine gun, seeing many strikes in the wings and near the engine. It was at this point that LeLong started attracting the attention of heavy shore batteries. Luckily for the Mosquito crew, their shells were seen to fall short. It was time to go home. The B&V 138 was last heading southeast, actually in a turn when last seen, with black smoke trailing from it. German records suggest this aircraft made it down safely, but it seems that cine camera footage gained LeLong a confirmed victory for the BV 138. Another incident that LeLong is closely associated with occurred on Valentine's Day, 1945. British intelligence had become aware of a German operation in January 1945 dubbed Dron-Halla. In short, this was a plan to attack Scapa Flow with composite aircraft, popularly known as Mistrals. In February, 2 specialist units based at Ford were detailed to attack the Danish Mistral base at Teerstrup. Bad weather thwarted them twice, but a third attempt on the 14th of February experienced better conditions. Flying Officer LeLong, then attached to the fighter experimental flight at Ford, took off with another Mosquito to attack the previously inactive enemy airfield. In the second seat, and acting as chief navigator, was McLaren, then also a flying officer. I have to ask here, what did LeLong do wrong to miss out on a promotion while McLaren had gained a commission and then achieved an equal rank to his pilot? Seems strange. There's definitely a story behind that somewhere. The 2 Mozzie crews may not have known why they had been sent to Denmark that day, but they were prepared for what might await them. Arriving over the airfield after a long and low transit across the North Sea, LeLong immediately went into action targeting the strange aircraft below. He reported what happened next. I approached the aerodrome from the east, the aerodrome being hard to find owing to snow and ice. On approach, I flew parallel to the east-west runway on the south side. At first, I could not see any aircraft, but finally saw about 5 to 6 FW-190s and Ju-88 pickerbacks with normal camouflage, well dispersed in fir trees. My sight was unserviceable, so I used the plate glass for sighting, letting strikes hit the ground in front of one of these pickerbacks. I pulled the nose up a little and saw many strikes on both the FW-190 and Ju-88. Numerous personnel working around these aircraft were scattered by the attack. I turned south into the next dispersal bay and made a similar type of attack on another pickerback, also seeing strikes. I then turned west and attacked for a second time the first pickerback that I previously damaged. This time both the Ju-88 and FW-190 burst into flames. After breaking away from this last attack, light flak opened up at me, so we headed for our rendezvous at Mariaja. 2 columns of black smoke was seen long after the aerodrome was left. Flying Officer Lalong would claim 2 composites destroyed on the ground. The 2 Mozzies made it back safe and sound, but it would be their ground crews who copped it next. Both aircraft had been fitted with 2 50-gallon drop tanks in order to make the trip. While still feet wet before crossing the Danish coast, Long and Tony Kraft, and the other Mosquito, had pressed the tit. Only 2 of the 4 drop tanks fell into the North Sea. As hard as he pushed, Kraft's tanks wouldn't budge. In fact, Lalong risked breaking the strict radio silence to call up and beseech Kraft that it would be better, for God's sake, to drop the bloody drop tanks. On arriving back at Ford, Kraft and his navigator John Walters prepared to leave the aircraft. Just as Kraft let go of the control column, 2 big thumps announced the long-awaited drop of the 2 jet tanks. As they beat a quick retreat to the mess, someone was giving someone else a bollocking back at dispersal. Operation Dron-Halla was quietly cancelled by the Germans, and there is some evidence that this suited the OKL just fine. Roy Lalong would end the war with a bar to his DFC he was awarded in January 1945, as well as 7 confirmed destroyed enemy aircraft in the air, and 1 probable and 1 damaged. He is also credited with at least 3 V1s. Lalong also claimed several shared destroyed or damaged on the ground or, as we heard, on the water. He was to transfer to the Royal Air Force after peace was declared and served with the US 5th Air Force in Korea in 1952. Following this short combat tour, he flew with the 1st Hawker Hunter Squadron in the RAF, 43 Squadron. In 1955, he was given command of 257 Squadron, also on Hunters. With a long and distinguished career in the Royal New Zealand Air Force and Royal Air Force, Roy Lalong can best be remembered as the pilot who shot down the first enemy aircraft over Normandy, mere minutes after the invasion had begun. If you'd like to hear a bit more about what the Germans were doing during the Battle of Normandy, check out the video on screen now, and if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like and think about subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.